The two pools at the bottom of the steps have two faucets that are gargoyles. The water spouts from the mouth of the gargoyles. And most people think it bears resemblance to Aztec and Maya sculpture. They're made out of volcanic stone, so we are not sure if they're local. Most likely they were made by someone in the area, but you can imagine that there was a master craftsman that was teaching the native Luiseño how to carve and showing them the influence of particularly Aztec sculpture.
Welcome to California Frontier, the show about the often overlooked and unexpected early history of the place we call California. I'm your host, Damian Basic. Can we take a step back for a second just to illuminate a little of the history? The Mormon Battalion. What was the Mormon Battalion?
So the Mormon Battalion is the only religious branch of the military, of the U.S. military, that has ever existed, basically. They were hired by the American Army to serve as basically the guides during the Mexican-American War to trace a land route between east and west. So their idea was to cross the desert and to establish like the foundation for the rest of the American Army to come and occupy California.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes, because I've seen there's the Mormon Battalion Museum, in fact, in Old Town San Diego, if I remember correctly. But It's been a long time since I've been there. Okay, so interesting. And then Charbonneau, the son of Sacagawea. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yes, so the Mormon Battalion hires Baptiste Charbonneau, the son of Sacagawea, as their guide. Charbonneau was raised by, I believe it was Clark from the Lewis and Clark expedition.
And Sacagawea was their guide.
Yeah, and he was an explorer. He was hired to come with them, and when they ended here at Mission San Luis Rey, he was appointed as the first mayor of San Luis Rey because he was half native. From a very different tribe, but he was half native. His father was French and his mom was Sacagawea. And he is mayor here at the newly formed San Luis Rey village for a few months, no longer than 7 months, and he ends up quitting his position because he felt he had no power against the newly formed Office of Indian Affairs.
This is prior to statehood, but when California is occupied by the U.S. Army. Okay. Mm-hmm. So then how do we get to the point where the mission is now restored, beautiful, in one piece?
Oh, that's a long story. That's a really long story. I did a lot of research on that particular subject last year. I was able to visit several times the archives at Mission Santa Barbara. Most people don't know this, but Mission Santa Barbara and Mission San Luis Rey are connected because of who administrates the missions today. Out of all the missions in California, only 2 today are Franciscan missions, Santa Barbara and San Luis Rey. So I'm happy to say that I have access to their archives easier than other researchers in the area. And I went back and forth to study the history of the restoration and the community. And that is the Franciscan community.
Okay.
That still occupies both missions. So to make another long story short, after Abraham Lincoln grants the mission back to the Catholic Church, that was per request of the Archbishop of Monterrey. The Archbishop of Monterrey, who happened to want to establish his seat, his cathedral, in Old Mission Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara was the repository of both mission artifacts and the Franciscan friars during secularization. So when the Franciscans were expelled and where they lost territory and when there was nothing else to do for a mission, they ended up going to Mission Santa Barbara. And it was the only mission that was always occupied by Franciscan presence. with an archbishop, a secular archbishop, who wants to have their mission as the seat of his cathedral, he decides to grant Mission San Luis Rey to the Franciscan friars. That was sometime in the 1870s. The Franciscan friars, there were like 8 or 9 friars left at Mission Santa Barbara. They refuse. They take the matter to the Pope. The Pope agrees with them, and they tell him, you don't have to abandon Mission Santa Barbara. The Archbishop will go and establish his seat somewhere else. But they still take possession of Mission San Luis Rey. Between the 1860s and 1880s, Mission Santa Barbara becomes an apostolic college. That is a school for missionary people. It is not very successful, but they managed to attract a few people, mostly Irish immigrants, to become Franciscan missionaries under Mexican culture at Mission Santa Barbara. One of these Irish priests was Father Jeremiah O'Keefe. And in order to save what was left of Mission Santa Barbara in the 1880s, he does a trip to Mexico. He goes to different areas in Mexico, trying to convince Franciscan friars in different areas in Mexico to come and help them. But the friars in Mexico were not in a very good position either, because Mexican government was confiscating their own territories as well in the 1850s and 60s.
This is when Benito Juárez is president, right?
Exactly, yes. That was not a very successful attempt. So he ends up writing to new Franciscan communities, mostly German immigrants, back east. And it is them who come and help the friars at Mission Santa Barbara, and they become part of a new province. It was the province of the Sacred Heart. But then, after 20 years, Father O'Keefe is called by a group of Franciscan friars from Zacatecas, from the old College of Guadalupe in Zacatecas, and they say, we want to see if we can establish a school over there. They come, scout the ruins of Mission San Luis Rey. They ask for permission. The heads of the order say, yes, you're able to rebuild a school here. And a community of Mexican Franciscan friars come in 1892 to restore the mission under the leadership of Father Jeremiah O'Keefe, an Irish immigrant who became a Franciscan at Mission Santa Barbara, who restored it. He's considered the second founder of the rebuilder of Mission San Luis Rey.
And I think it's so interesting that you have a group of missionaries from the College of Zacatecas, which is the same college that sent missionaries to northern Alta California in the 1830s, when a lot of the Spanish Fernandinos, right, from the College of San Fernando left. And so,
yes,
I mean, for example, at Santa Clara, where I used to live and do a lot of work, we had Zacatecan Franciscans, etc. So it's interesting to see that they also came back in the 1890s. So then, tell me something now, since you're an art historian and you've done a lot of work on the mission and in and around the mission. What are some of the most interesting things that you see, and that when people come to visit you recommend that they take a look at?
Well, if you only have 20 minutes, go to the historic church. It is a beautiful church. Craftsmanship is 99% Luiseño. I always like to highlight that. But somehow it's a very European-looking church with some very naive motifs, like in the recreation of certain textures on the plaster of the walls, like trying to make up like tile or marble or velvet curtains. It's very beautiful and very interesting to see those details, not just at this mission. There are details like that all throughout the 21 mission churches in California. We also have one of the most important Spanish colonial art collections of any mission. And it is the result of different things. First, Franciscan friars from Zacatecas, Mexico, from the College of Guadalupe, they bring artwork to the mission. I don't know if most of your listeners know this, but the old College of Guadalupe in Zacatecas today is one of the most important Spanish colonial collections in Mexico. They had a massive collection, and when the friars came here in the 1890s, they brought some pieces with them. So we have very interesting pieces that are they are, in my opinion, museum quality. You can find them at museums, mostly in Mexico City, but also in Europe, Madrid, the Museo de las Américas. Beautiful pieces by Miguel Cabrera, by José de Alcibar, which were masters in their craft. We have a very beautiful painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe made by José de Alcibar with a certificate of, not certificate of authenticity, but the legend and the signature by José de Alcibar with the date that came with the friars from Zacatecas in the 1890s.
So what date or time period are we looking at with that one, for example?
Most of the artwork that we have in the church is from the mid 1700s, 1760s, 70, 80, and maybe a little bit later.
So older than the church itself.
Yes, and it's something that we're still doing research on. Right now, we have two statues of our Mary and Joseph that are located in the main altar of our church. We took them for conservation earlier this year. We work with Balboa Arts Conservation Center, a nonprofit conservation studio in San Diego who works with major museums in the area. They know our collection pretty well. And we were doing research on the statues. And when they were doing the examinations, they noticed that the statues were repainted. So I date statues based on how it looks now. So Mary and Joseph look like statues from maybe early 1800s. But after doing some research, they discovered that someone had repainted in the early 1800s over gilding and details that might be earlier than that. So we were able to figure out that statues that we assumed were from the early 1800s might be actually 100 years earlier than that. And that is something that is ongoing right now.
Oh, wow.
So that's the type of research that I'm trying to bring to the table at the mission.
So with artworks like these, it must be quite a task to try and keep them in good shape and keep them preserved.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of termite damage, and that is something that we're trying to fix. It's not an easy task. It's something that will definitely take a little bit longer than what most people assume, but we are working on getting mostly the collection that is on display now. We're working on getting it fixed and having it properly researched and giving it not just a time frame, but an origin story, to a provenance. That's how we say it. So we have, for example, pieces that come from Zacatecas in Mexico, but our church also has a lot of the pieces that originally belonged to Mission San Diego.
Oh, really?
And the Presidio Church.
Now, how is that? How did that come about?
Nobody knows exactly how it came about. So we have, it's about a dozen pieces. There is a book, James Nolan. He tracked the story of the pieces and how they ended up here at the mission. The book is called The Discovery of the Lost Art Treasures of California's First Mission.
All right, I'm going to look that one up.
He uses photographic evidence from the 1800s and early 1900s to track the story of the artwork we have in the historic church to the Presidio Church and the Mission Church at San Diego. So apparently what happened during secularization, Jose Maria Estudillo, very important, prominent man in San Diego, ordered that all the valuables of the Presidio Church had to be taken to his house. And from his house, he donated them to what is called now the Adobe Chapel, or the Church of Immaculate Conception in Old Town in San Diego. So that is when they were recorded, photographed, and we can associate, or we can track the provenance to the artwork that we have at Mission San Luis Rey to the Adobe Chapel in San Diego. last photograph in San Diego, I believe it's from the 1930s. And from there, nobody knew what happened to the artwork until James Nolan did his research. In his research, he interviews a friar who was the administrator of Mission San Luis Rey for a few years, Father Anthony Soto and Father Dominic Gallardo. And he was the one. He's the one who tells them, "Oh yeah, they brought these over from San Diego." When? We don't know. Maybe the 1930s, but nobody registered anything. Nobody recorded anything. He just happened to see a painting in our church and see a photo of it from Old Town in the 1880s.
So then, these things that are from San Diego, from Mission San Diego, for example, they remain and they will remain in San Luis Rey. It's not like that there's going to be some sort of repatriation.
They are part of our mission collection. Apparently, they were donated.
Okay, I see. Yeah. Very interesting.
We have a statue. It's the statue of the Immaculate Conception. She's considered the saint patron of San Diego. And she was in the main altar of the adobe chapel. And we have her sitting in one of our church chapels. We're working on having it go to conservation next year.
Oh, wow.
Very beautiful gilded statue.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that makes San Luis Rey so interesting is that the fact that it has this sort of dome, and there's another side dome, right? And you don't really get that in most of the other California missions, and it also makes for some really great acoustics, right?
Yes, our church has incredible acoustics.
I remember, and what really made me think of that is I remember one of the first conferences I went to of the California Mission Studies Foundation. There was a man there who led a choir. At the time, he used to lead a choir of early California music, and he was standing in the side chapel, I guess, singing the alabado. And it was just gorgeous, just to hear that. And he wasn't even projecting his voice, but it was echoing all throughout. So I think it's a really beautiful and fascinating church. What about on the grounds itself? What other unique features are there that you might want to see if you visit the mission?
Well, if you have more than 20 minutes, then go to the lavanderia.
Okay, yes.
After seeing the church.
Tell us all about that. I got to have the tour with you of the lavanderia, and it's really cool. So what stands out?
Well, if Mission San Luis Rey was grand and vast and wealthy, the lavanderia shows that. It's not. Other missions have still their lavanderias in front of their churches.
And
mostly.
The lavanderia is, can you define it for everybody?
It's lavanderia is the Spanish word for laundry. It is a place where people used to get water, but mostly women did laundry once or twice a week during the mission era. In Mission San Luis Rey, the lavanderia was an entire gated area with an orchard as well. And there are steps. It's 46 steps. We ask fourth graders to count because that slows them down running through ruins of the steps. 46 steps leading down to 2 areas with pools and the ruins of an old filtration system. Today, the lavanderia is in ruins. We're working on redoing the space, making it a little more walkable and tourist friendly, mostly safe for field trips and tours as well, and adding native gardens to make the area a little more sustainable as well. But you can see the ruins of the old kiln, and there had been several archaeological studies done on the lavanderia and how big it actually was. The ruins of the lavanderia were basically interrupted when the street right in front of the Mission Avenue, was made. That destroyed the lavanderia, and part of it just ended up on the other side of the street outside of Mission property.
Oh, wow.
But it was a beautiful, intricate area. One of the travelers in the 1860s, I believe it was Duhot-Silly. No, it was Eugene Duflot de Montfras. when he writes about the lavanderia, he compares it to the orangeria at Versailles.
Oh, wow.
That's how big it was. And he says, not because it was grand, but the distribution of the steps make me think of the dimensions of the steps of the orangeria at Versailles.
You also showed us when we were there some of the artistic features of the lavanderia, especially ones that kind of harken back to Mexico. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. So the two pools at the bottom of the steps have two faucets that are gargoyles. The water spouts from the mouth of the gargoyles. And most people think it bears resemblance to Aztec and Maya sculpture. They're made out of volcanic stone, so we are not sure if they're local. Most likely they were made by someone in the area. But you can imagine that there was a master craftsman that was teaching the native Luiseño how to carve and showing them the influence of the particularly Aztec sculpture for the features of the lavanderia.
Yeah, when I saw those, I mean, not being really an art historian myself, but having studied Mexican culture and history, you can't help but recognize those faces and those motifs. Mm-hmm. So then you, as an art historian from Mexico, do you see a lot of similarities and connections? And also, what differences do you notice between the types of art and architecture that you find at the Mission San Luis Rey in particular, and maybe buildings or structures or art from the same time period in Mexico or central Mexico? What is the connection? Do you see a connection? I mean, obviously there must be some connection.
Yes and no. I'm from Mexico City. Mexico City was a big city back in the day. It was like the biggest cultural center closest to California at that point. And California was frontier land. So anything that came over here was an adaptation that had to work for the specific needs that you have in a territory that is far from pretty much everything else that you know of. The missions were interconnected. We know that for sure. There was not much trade allowed individually for the missions, but they were still able to benefit from the big Spanish trade, being right in between China, the Manila galleons, on their way back to Mexico and Peru. So you kind of see those little items like the lacquered chests. You see the vestments made out of silk that the friars were able to get to, that you will see similarly in Mexico City. But you also see how things like architecture were adapted to the place, the specific place, and the needs here. For example, in Mexico City, where I'm from, churches were built from stones of the destroyed Aztec temples because that's what was available. Here you don't have that, so you have to make your own construction material. That's why we have adobe and clay. They intentionally established Mission San Luis Rey by a riverbank so they could use the clay to make the bricks for the church. Yeah.
Right.
They had to find construction material like the roof in the church. The wood beams come from Mount Palomar, oak trees in Mount Palomar, because that was the tallest tree in the area. You cannot build a church bigger than what we have because you don't have taller trees than that. So it is trying to adapt what you know of, what's familiar, into the specific needs that you have in the frontier territories.
Right. What other building projects or restoration projects are going on right now? There's the lavanderia you mentioned. Is there anything else going on?
We have the lavanderia, and we're working right now on making sure that at least the artwork in the historic church is preserved in the near future. The church is constantly working on preservation projects. We had this year the church repainted by Spectra. Spectra has worked on the retrofit and reconstruction of a lot of historic buildings, including missions. we're reworking on sound systems, and we're constantly doing fundraisers to help preserve the church and the mission itself. Today, the mission operates. The mission was rebuilt as a seminary for the friars, but the seminary is no longer here. So our church has a big area that was restored with dormitories and classrooms, and now it is used as a retreat center, and people can stay here overnight. So that helps with operational funds as well. We work with the museum. Well, at the museum, we work on preservation mostly and visitor engagement and experience. We have the only active cemetery and the oldest active cemetery in San Diego County. And it is one of the very few mission cemeteries where anybody can come and buy property to be buried here as well. So it is a mission that is still very active in other areas as well. And the heart of it is because we're in a historic building that needs preservation.
Right. So if somebody were to come visiting San Diego and wants to visit a mission San Luis Rey and say they have a half day, how would you structure their visit if they were if they had some good time to look around?
Good time to look around. Definitely don't miss the church. If you're coming on your own, there are materials at the church desk that our volunteers can let you borrow to learn a little bit about the art that we have in the church. If you can come on a Saturday or Sunday, sign up for a guided tour. It's the most complete experience that we offer. And it lets you get into certain areas that are not open to public because we are an active mission. And we have other responsibilities as well, like privacy for our guests of our retreat center. But I would suggest sign up for a guided tour or call us in advance. We can arrange a private tour if you call us with enough time to plan ahead. And we can make sure that the experience is good. I would suggest the church is a must. If you only have 20 minutes, go to the church. That's my personal opinion. The historic cemetery, it is an incredible place as well. There is a lot of local history to learn just by reading the tombstones in the historic section of the cemetery. And I highlight historic section because our cemetery is active and it's expanding. So you see a modern new cemetery right next to a really old cemetery.
I see.
The oldest in the area. Then to get a little more perspective of what the history of the mission is and what happened here, our museum is, I would say, after seeing several mission museums, it's probably one of the biggest, the one that occupies the most space. And I like that it tells on purpose the story of the two communities, not just the building, of the two communities that are responsible of the construction and preservation of the place. So, of course, we tell the story of the indigenous people, of the Luiseño people, and we tell the story of the Franciscan friars and how they still take care of this place, basically, just as in Mission Santa Barbara. We have a beautiful gift shop. People love our gift shop. We have a coffee shop with a beautiful patio overlooking the oldest pepper tree in California, 200-year-old pepper tree. And then grab energy to hike down to the lavandería because, again, the lavandería is not right next to the church like in other missions. It is a hike down the property, and you have to go down 46 steps and go back up 46 steps.
And you can count them.
Yeah, we count them every single day. We have fourth graders. It slows them down. That's our trick.
Well, good. I would highly recommend a visit to Mission San Luis Rey, especially if you're in the San Diego area or if you're in Orange County. I've been very impressed by it, and exactly the history connected to it, and the fact that it's in such a beautiful state. And, you know, the Luiseño people are still active and connected to the mission. There's the story of Pablo Tac. There's Father Peri. There's Father O'Keefe, who helped bring it back. There's so many interesting stories. And then that lavandería, as you mentioned, which is very spectacular. and you can just imagine people down there doing their laundry, etc. It's a really great place and a beautiful location to visit.
And if I may say one more
please.
thing about the Luiseño people in particular. Well, the local band of Mission Indians, the San Luis Rey Band of Mission Indians, has been fighting for federal recognition for a long, long time. So they depend on institutions around the area. That one of those institutions is the mission to help them preserve their culture and traditions. There is a very recent book done by a local Luiseño a scholar. Her name is Olivia Chilcote. Her book is called Unrecognized in California. And she tells the story of the fight for federal recognition and how federal recognition has affected her particular tribe, the San Luis Rey Band of Mission Indians, and how difficult it is to do anything without the federal recognition when they try to preserve. The only thing they want to do is to preserve their own culture and traditions.
Yeah, I know that's a big struggle. Also, here in Northern California, a number of indigenous groups looking for that federal recognition, which is key to being able to do a lot of different things. But is there anything else that we want to mention before we finish up?
If you're ever in San Diego in North County, don't forget to visit Mission San Luis Rey.
Absolutely.
It is a must. And because the mission is kind of far from downtown Oceanside. We're about 5 miles inland. A lot of people who visit the area just for the beaches kind of miss the mission. And it is a beautiful space. Once you get to see what the mission is about, it's a place that attracts people for some reason. It has like an interesting energy.
It really does. So, Helena, I want to thank you. Mission San Luis Rey is one of my favorite places to visit when I'm in the San Diego area, Oceanside. And if people have a chance to go there, they may even meet you, right?
I run tours every once in a while.
If you're so lucky as to have a tour with Helena Hazleton, you will come away knowing a lot about the history and art and architecture of Mission San Luis Rey.
But any docent is equally passionate about what we do at the mission.
So thank you. Thank you for spending your time to talk with us. And once again, I really appreciate what you've talked about, and I really think everybody should take the opportunity to visit Mission San Luis Rey.
Yes. Well, thank you, Damian.
You are welcome. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the California Frontier Show. If you'd like to support the show, the best thing to do is to let other people know about it. If you'd like to support it monetarily, there are a couple ways of doing that. One is by scrolling down in your podcast app to where it says support the show. There you can become a subscriber for as little as $3 a month. And if you want to give a one-time donation, just below you'll see where it says give a one-time donation. Finally, the show is supported by California History Teachers, which is a full year of lessons for 4th grade California History and Social Studies. You can find out more at www.californiahistoryteachers.com. And if you input the coupon code PODCAST, you'll receive 25% off your monthly or annual subscription. So check it out.